Hey YouTube, I'm Babblerab, and this is my Deletor deck. Something I've been working on for the past month or so to get all the cards for. I finally got it to a point where it's very playable. Pretty much the deck list is almost entirely filled out. It's missing, ideally, 2 more cards that I would like to acquire, but otherwise completely playable, and the deck can function perfectly fine without the extra 2 cards. I'll get around to saying what the changes I will eventually make to the deck are once I get to the cards I need to do. In addition, 2 things. This is probably the deck I'm thinking of taking to locals this weekend, if I'm able to make it to locals. Another possibility would be my duo deck, which maybe there'll be a profile coming soon, maybe not, I'm not sure. I may also attempt to bring my camera to the locals, see if I can get some game videos for you guys as well, for the people who do watch me, and thank you guys for the first 2 subscribers. Yeah, you're awesome. It's been working fairly well overall, and as you can see, it is double sleeved, which is primarily so I can show off these amazing Emperor Palpatine sleeves that I have gotten, or that I had a long time ago. So that's pretty much everything I want to say. Okay, so for the grade 0s, you got your starting Vanguard, and I'm playing 2 copies of it because he is amazing. The starting Vanguard, ideally for this deck, is Igor. What he does is when the Vanguard is deleted, your opponent's Vanguard, sorry, he soul charges himself, and then you unflip a damage and you draw 1. Now this is very important for deleters, mainly because this particular build does not have a lot of draw power in its triggers, in its trigger form. I'm centering this build entirely around offense, so there is no room for draw triggers because I maxed out as much as I could on stand and crits. I still play heals though, so there's that. But most of your big grade 3 deleters are very counterblast heavy in their effects, so it's important to have as much damage unflipping as possible in the deck. So yeah, I'm playing double. One you're guaranteed to start with, the other one if you draw into it's just an added bonus, and you're able to thin through your deck even more and unflip more damage. Trigger lineup is 3 heals, 3 Eddie. Nope, that's 4 heals and 4 Eddie. I can count sometimes. Heals of Vanilla, nothing special about it other than the fact it has Deletor in its name. What Eddie does is he gives you additional draw power. If he's called to rearguard, when your opponent has a deleted Vanguard, you draw a card. I mean, you lose a 10k shield, but the idea is to be able to cycle through your deck very quickly. Plus he's a stand trigger, and that's very important in the way I'm playing this deck. And then 2 additional stands, just so, again, you're able to be swinging as much as possible with your rearguards before you swing with your Vanguard. Like I said, very, very, very offensive-based trigger lineup here. And then 4 of the new crits. I think that's Jiva. Yep, probably. Anyway, so 4 of the new crit trigger. What the new crit trigger does is you put it on top of your deck. After it's finished boosting a unit, when your opponent has a deleted Vanguard, you shuffle your deck. The cost is to put it on top of your deck. And then what's important here is that you unflip 1 damage. As I said, deleters are a very counterblast heavy deck with their grade 3s. So you do need to have that unflipping of damage available to you as much as possible. And the fact that he has that extra bonus is, in my mind, worth the fact that you do, again, lose a 10k shield for his effect, because it reloads your deck with the crit triggers and allows you to potentially use your deleter effects more, since, again, very, very counterblast heavy. So there's that, and then 2 more crit triggers. It's, like I said, very, very offensive based deck. So that's the whole trigger lineup. I'm moving on to the grade 1s now. So grade 1 lineup is Triple Gunnick, which is a Soul Blast 2 draw 1. I may cut him out for a 4th copy of Drown, honestly, because I think I like Drown more. He can get through the deck quicker, but he's still good. He's a good target for Oxes if you need to soul charge him. He's a good target for Greyon if you need to retire him. And you get his effect off, and then he's doing nothing else on the field anyway, so he's kind of really good in that sense. And again, this deck plays a lot of draw power. Not as much as maybe Bermudas or something, but that's neither here nor there. You got the 2 Igors, you've got the 3 Gunnicks, and then you've got the 3 Drowns. So, in my opinion, that's a substantial amount of draw power, since you're dedicating, I think, 6 cards to an extent to drawing cards from your deck, which is, in my opinion, a good compensation for the lack of draw triggers. Then I'm playing Triple Drown. What Drown does is, after you have boosted a Deletor Vanguard, and it doesn't matter if your opponent has a deleted Vanguard or not with this guy, or what grade your Deletor Vanguard is, so he's fantastic for early game. He soul charges himself from the field, then you discard a card from your hand, and you draw 2. So, in theory, it's technically a 1 for, or it's a 2 for 2, but what this guy's good for doing is cycling through your deck early on so that you're able to get to the combo pieces that you need to, which is hopefully Greyon or Oxes, because the deck pretty much has to run with that. Then I'm playing 3 of the new Perfect Guard, Ender. I have a 4th copy of him, I just don't know if I want to take anything out yet. For the most part, he's just a vanilla Perfect Guard. I've never actually activated his effect, but in a sense, when there's another copy of him in your drop zone and your opponent has a deleted Vanguard, if they haven't flipped their Vanguard face up through riding or striding, and you Perfect Guard with this guy, well, there's a second one in the drop zone, at the end of that turn, your opponent redeletes their Vanguard. So you don't technically have to waste Counterblast using one of your big grade 3s effects that turn. Have I ever resolved this? Absolutely not. Most people usually want to make sure their Vanguard is face up on their turn, and odds are you're probably winning anyway if your opponent can't ride or flip their Vanguard up. So he's good, I've just never got his effect off, and I have 4 of him compared to the other Perfect Guards, so yeah. Last one is 4 copies of Guam. When he boosts a successful attack, actually I should read that real quick. Yes, when he boosts a successful attack on a Vanguard, you choose a unit in your opponent's front row and lock it. And he's a 7k booster, which is, you know, it's 1,000 less than 8k, but in my opinion that's pretty good still. That's the entire grade 1 lineup. Moving on to the grade 2s. Okay, so the grade 2 lineup is 3 copies of Gale. Gale is pretty simple. If your opponent has a deleted Vanguard, when he is called to rear guard, you lock a unit in your opponent's front row. So it's a fantastic way to put additional pressure on the board, and because you have so much draw power, you're very likely to acquire 2 copies of him in your hand throughout the course of the game. So locking both your opponent's front row pretty much shuts down any offensive plans they may or may not be able to have. The only real big threat would be a Vanguard with a particular effect that powers himself up, or a stride unit. So Gale is fantastic for shutting down any counterattacks your opponent may have, and if you're able to unflip the damage, unflip the damage off of card effects and get the lock off, I think it's particularly devastating. Then we're playing 3 copies of Gailey. When he's placed on Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, you sack a Deletor, and then sack a unit in your opponent's front row, vanish delete something from their grave, and then he gains 2k power. So it's once again similar to how Gale works, but he is basically used for more field control so that you can basically pressure your opponent's front row so they're not able to launch as many attacks at you, or they have to invest more resources in launching attacks. Plus the extra power boost is nice against a locked Vanguard as well, and he kind of replaces the 12k attacker for the deck. And then the last thing, I am playing 4 copies of the Damage on Flipper, 9k, so can't complain there. I mean, if he was 10k, it would be absolutely incredible, but 9k is perfect for it. And basically, if this guy connects an attack, I think it's on Vanguard, but I will check that right now. Yep, if it connects an attack with a Vanguard, you unflip a damage. So that's incentive to guard that guy right there, but if he ends up hitting, that's just more damage you're able to use for your big grade 3s when they come out. Speaking of the grade 3s, we're moving on to those right now. And now we get to the star players of the deck. Starting with 4 copies of Daunting Deletor Oxes. This guy is pretty much the grade 3 you almost always want to see, at least until I get 4 copies of Greyon, then you don't really care which of the grade 3s you see. What he does is he counterblasts 3, you soul charge 1 Deletor from your side of the field, and then you delete your opponent's Vanguard. In addition, this is where it gets even nastier, he also gains 10k attack. So unboosted, he's a 21k attacker with the twin drive. In addition, if your opponent has a deleted Vanguard and he's in your Vanguard circle, your opponent has to discard a card in order to be able to ride. So if you've got your opponent at grade 2 and you use this guy's effect, they go neg 1 just to be able to hit grade 3, which is solid. The second best card in the grade 3 lineup is Greyon, but it's literally by almost nothing. Both cards are equally incredible. Greyon, upon hitting the Vanguard circle, you vanish delete 2 from your opponent's grave. So the Vanish Delete, if you can get it off enough, just absolutely wrecks Legion decks, which is fantastic. But then his effect is you counterblast 2, sack a Deleter, and then Vanish Delete 1 from your opponent's grave and delete your opponent's Vanguard. Now, what's nice about his effect, and why I don't like Kaios and Zale as much, yep, said his name correctly, is Kaios is only an on-ride effect, plus you're discarding 2 from hand, which is kind of a really big neg. And Zale is an on-Legion effect. What's nice about Oxes and Greyon is that you can use their effects as many times as you want, provided you're still able to pay the cost. So throughout the course of a whole game, you can get their effects off like 2, 3, or 4 times, depending on how well you can unflip the damage, which is not the case for Zale and Kaios. Zale, you've got to keep re-legioning in order to get his delete off. I mean, yes, he hits hard, he's got a high power by himself, but the key of this deck is to make sure that you can delete your opponent's Vanguard whenever possible, and pretty much 90% of all your effects come from it being deleted. So Greyon, in that sense, is a fantastic secondary Vanguard because his effect can be used multiple times. And then the last 2 cards in the deck are 2 Zale. As I've already stated, I'm probably going to be cutting this guy eventually for 2 more copies of Greyon, just because Greyon has the reusable effect over and over again. But he can help recycling cards that you need, and you can still use him as a late game ditch if need be. So, yeah. And then I'm going to probably finish it off with the Stride deck that I'm never going to use. Except for maybe Madu, which will be somewhere. Okay, so moving on to probably the least important section of the deck. This is called Get Cards That Have Link Joker in their name or Cray Elementals and put them into a Stride deck. So, with that in mind, we are playing 2 Genesis Dragon. Sorry, 2 Genesis Dragon Judgment Messiah. Because I just got these cards today. But anyway, I think how he works is if he connects an attack, you lock something in your opponent's back row, and then you can lock up to 1 card. Which, in this case, I don't think you'd ever want to unlock the 1 card. So, I said lock up to 1 card. I meant lock 1 in your opponent's back row and then unlock up to 1 card, but you never want to do that because this isn't Messiahs. This is Deletors. Will you ever be striding this? If you get desperate. And if you get desperate, you're probably losing anyway, so yeah, there's that problem. And then 2 Maximum Seal Dragon, just because they were really, really cheap to purchase and they're a Stride unit. I can't give you any other reason. That's it. And then 2 Madus, because I pulled them from the Vanguard and Deleter thing, and he's actually got some application, because if you have Gale, you can pretty much like infinitely stride, so you could technically play like 4 of him for free strides for 4 turns if you really want. I don't know. It's an idea. But yeah, that's the entire Deleter deck. I am open to any suggestions you guys may have in it, and yeah, I'm Babblerab, and I'll talk to you guys later.